Well, let me start by asking this. How have you observed we've been affected by our constant interaction with media?
I like to say that the gatekeepers to information have been slain, and that we're kind of in a place now where anybody can access information that they just never had before. So that's all really cool. There's definitely something to be said about just the fact that it's a brand new time in history, a brand new piece of technology that's changing the world, and people are still having to adjust in real time to figuring out, how the hell do we deal with this? Like there weren't classes on this in school, right? So it's all very new, and I think that the people closest to it, the people that are on their phones 24/7, whether it's for work or just young kids growing up with it, they're the ones that are getting hit the hardest with it. So it's an interesting period. So I don't know. I don't know if there's like a net gain or a net negative effect on the world, but it's definitely chaotic. We'll leave it at that.
How do we fit active media consumption into our everyday lives?
Most people I don't think need to be consuming that much media. Like I tell my friends, 'cause I'm like really into politics. I keep up with politics and culture every day. Like it's a almost like a hobby for me, I guess you could say. I
Mhm.
tell people like if that's something that you're interested in, like from like a hobbyist perspective, or if you want to be an activist and you're someone that wants to change the world in some way, both of those two things, I guess those are fine excuses to wanting to consume information from different sources every day. But if you're not one of those two things, like I don't see that much benefit from consuming tons of information every day. Most people would be better off just like with a once a week check in, like kind of like a recap almost at the end of the week.
It was easy back when I was growing up to spot the National Enquirer at the grocery aisle and then see the LA Times and understand the difference between them. If you're growing up in this new baby technology, we'll call it, it might be harder to make that distinction. And I think that gets lost on people. What are some things you think people can do to safeguard themselves from fake news and misinformation?
The first thing I think of is, well, how do you get ahead of the eight ball, which is like, how do you get to the proactive measure of countering fake news and misinformation versus just constantly trying to react to it? Proactively, the solutions are obviously within education. From like a reactive level, I think like societally on all levels, I mean, in terms of politically, just culturally, online, we need to have more I don't know how to more succinct, more open conversations about the history of media and the history of how it's been politicized and within our lifetime and within the past 75 or so years. And I think just like educating people and having more conversations to get on somewhat of a same page. Like it's impossible. We all know we're never going to get 100% of people, but we can just like shift that percentage up a little bit by having more political dialogue, getting it more in the education system, talking about it more publicly. I think that's a huge step in just getting people to know when they click on a certain link that they can understand, even if like let's say they're prone to conspiracy, like they can at least have like an inkling of like I know what I'm clicking on versus just that like knee jerk reaction of not of thoughtlessness, just being like, oh, I'm reading this thing, therefore it's true. And I think it's really as simple as it is to like get that like small instinct in there. I think it takes a lot of work. So
So, on that note, are major US news outlets bigger trolls than Russia or China at this point in the game?
obviously, in terms of like interference, the U.S. runs interference in elections and has historically all over the world, as we know, the many coup attempts and successful coups that our government has done. So I think there's definitely a give and take in terms of like our participation versus other countries trying to tamper in our information warfare and elections and all that. But it's hard to say. I mean, the U.S. is the kingpin of trolls. I mean, we might have invented trolling, so I don't know.
What effect does online politics have on elections?
It's just I think it's the effect is less so, let's say, on like literal elections, more so on like the long term effect of how people are susceptible to propaganda and information.
How does cancel culture affect media literacy?
I tend to think that cancel culture as a term was more useful, let's say, a year ago than it is today. It's become so politicized. So there's different like avenues. Some people, when they say cancel culture, they literally mean that the sort of culture of people online that are just quick to jump on like a mob effect almost and just criticize any take. It's a natural thing when you put people and institutions on pedestals because it's like it's just what you do. Like you create gods and they fall. It's like you have all these human failures within these institutions and just in general, like within public figures like you and I. And because people are like, we're told that we're supposed to trust, we're supposed to trust PBS. We're supposed to trust Pew Research. We're supposed to trust our scientists and our our leaders. As soon as they mess up, it becomes this like, well, we trusted you and you broke our trust. When in reality, it's good to have the checks and balances. Like we should demand higher standards, but we should also like not expect people to be perfect. Like we should expect human error. We should expect corruption.
Who needs protection, journalists or journalism?
I mean, both. Yes. The answer is yes.
Yeah.
There's been many threats to free speech. There's been many threats to journalism as a whole. I mean, as far as like media's rights to being able to like access certain information, report on things without the threat of the state. We'll say we've really came to terms with that during the George Floyd protests, as far as journalists getting literally attacked by the state, which is, I don't know, I won't say it's unprecedented. I mean, it's obviously happened in past decades during other movements, but I mean, in my lifetime at least, and it's never been at least covered at that scale. I mean, like, forget about the size and the magnitude of the movement itself. I've just never seen this many incidents of journalists and reporters being assaulted and being like literally threatened at a point in my life. There's also a online culture that can be really dangerous for journalists. Both the institution of journalism as a whole, which has been under threat for a long time, especially as local news dies, and even online media is dying and kind of like segmenting into fewer and fewer publications, or bigger ones are eating up other ones. And I think especially as time goes on, it is important to stay aware of that and to be able to kind of instill an attitude of people to, you don't have to trust everything they say, but you should have some level of respect and you want those institutions and those people to succeed.
What does the future of media look like, Nathan?
I do think there's going to be some form of revolution in terms of just the technology and people being fed up. Unfortunately, just like we were talked about at the beginning of this conversation, where the internet kind of killed the gatekeepers of information, and then the media landscape just revolutionized. We're going to see that happen again, and we're basically going to end up where we were before, where it's going to be just like cable news with internet news. Like we're going to have like a few just media, like international giants that like own a bunch of other companies. And it's like, we're already seeing that with like tech platforms like Facebook, Google, Twitter, et cetera. Like they've been the platforms for the past like 10, 15 years. And we're going to continue to see that kind of consolidate itself in some way, I think, in the future.